Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name's Chandra and I make videos about reading, writing, and all things books. Today's video is on how I organize my research. I've been doing a lot of research as I write historical fiction, and I was like, let me just share what I've been doing. I don't know if this will be helpful to someone, but I would like to also document my process for future me. And I do like to track how my process evolves, so this is one way to do that. The first way that I organize my research is digital. Most of what I do is in Google Keep. So I keep all my notes and categorize them by the kind of research with a brief description. And that just goes in, I have like a specific book and research tag, and then I have different tabs in that, or like pages, and I have one for, say, I'm primarily focused on 1880, so it'll be 1880 Boston, and then I'll put notes in there about maps will be a description, and then I'll put all of the links to the maps. And if it's more specific, I might make a little note, hey, this link is to this thing under a subheading of like maps. I include links to the site, but not all of them. So even though I'm reading through a ton of information and I'm looking at a bunch of different sites, I'm only including the sites that are specifically relevant with the specific, like, you know, I found very detailed and specific information on something. I link to however many sites I've dug through to get to that. I'm just linking to the last relevant site. I'm not keeping all of it. So that's drilling down specifically in the links and not just keeping all of the links I find or reading all of the sites. There might be other things that I bookmark on my browser, but they're not specifically going into my research because I don't necessarily need them for this. Sorting them into groups, even though it's, you know, a sequential list. And then of course, if you get more information, you can create separate playlists. I try not to have 84,000 playlists, but that is one way to get things organized. The next thing is within the playlist, when you're free writing your notes, and I think I have another video where I talk about free writing. If I don't, I will make one. But when you're free writing your notes, to reference the name of the video, and you don't really have to make a ton of additional notes as far as in the playlist because the titles of the videos are pretty self-explanatory. But when you find some information that you want to reference in your story, to reference what video it's in, where did you find this information, and just putting that into your free writing notes. And I think I have the video where I include like, here's what my resource key is, and so you can kind of make a note of that or use a different color ink when you write that in so that it's easy to find where and verify your research. The next thing, look in the video description to see if you can find additional sources that are cited, because that can be a really great way to find more specific information. If something is touched on in the video but they don't give a ton of detail and that's what you're specifically looking for, that's a really great way to find it. And then for videos, to determine if it's a reputable source, usually you can find like different historical societies or universities from a specific city or area where they're talking about their history, so you know that it's better information. Or even I've found a few cases where it is like a professor at a specific university making a video for that university and sharing information that way. So that's one way you can determine if the information is a bit more reputable versus like just watching random listables where it's like, it's great information to share, but it's not specifically verifiable. And if you're wanting to specifically verify the information, then those are great ways to check it. The next thing that I do is books. Of course, I read a lot of physical books. As I've dug down in my research, and the specific research that I'm reading is setting related, so I don't necessarily need to use all the information I'm finding in the story, but I do need the general background information. If there is something specific, then I'd like to use page flags. A lot of it, like I said, is reading for general background. Notes on specific things that I want to include, again, I will put in my free writing and add the page number so it's easy to go back to it. I also like to use other historical fiction books, so you can see where, especially in like Outlander is a great example, because this is one of the things that really inspired me to enjoy writing historical fiction. But in the beginning of the book, she talks about, Diana Gabaldon talks about the historical inaccuracies in her own books and why she decided to make the changes, and that she is aware that she's made a change. You can see the historical accuracy in the fiction as well as where it's different and understand why it's different. So those are some interesting things. Just by knowing the sources and being able to verify your information, you can keep it as accurate as possible. Number 4 is Google Keep. All of my digital notes are in Google Keep, so the format moves when you add links to the page. Even though it might be in that specific category, you can scroll to the bottom and it shows a picture and like details of the website that it's listed in, so it makes it really easy to find information. You can also add pictures. I don't use that function as often, but with some more difficult to find information where I'm like, I need to make sure I have this, I will put pictures in. And then of course, like I said, I have like Boston 1880, I have Baltimore 1880. Each of these is a separate note, but I color code those so I know like these are location specific versus 1880 general information. I have separate tabs for generally helpful information that's not related to a specific location. That might be cultural things like music and art and the different kinds of things that people would be able to go and see at the time. Like, you know, people aren't going to go to Woodstock for a concert in 1880, so that kind of music isn't going to be relevant versus, you know, what classical artists are relevant for the time, what kind of plays would the character be able to go see. So you can place those precisely in the story. So those categories are separate tabs, but I do link them and say, hey, like this one's music, this one's, you know, this or that, or, you know, historical events that are broader, not to a specific city. The next thing is for background text. Since I specialize in a specific time period, all of my reference books are pretty much limited to that time period. But if there is a specific area, like, you know, encyclopedias where it's covering a time frame, then I might use page flags to indicate like, hey, these are the specific pages that I would be looking at for what I'm working on. I read for general background information. I also have a Goodreads shelf where I document what I'm reading that's dedicated to the time period. So I have a shelf that's all about like books that were actually written in 1880, which is another resource where I can say, okay, if a character needs to read a book, what book are they reading that just came out in the time period? I have the same thing for music. I have a playlist specific to that. And a lot of this, the research and reading does double duty because it might have some books that are nonfiction books that are providing historical reference for the time period, but they're not going specifically into the story, but it also goes towards my reading goal. And all of that combines to general awareness of the media of the time period. And I'm generally familiar with everything that's going on and constantly expanding my research reference books because of that. Much of this can be categorized as world building, and I do list it in that same vein, but being aware of the cultural references of the time is important to me. Number 6 is the time. Notes and reference materials that don't apply to the specific time or background information. So if it's like, you know, 1879 and I'm looking at 1880, I can still read that just to know what's happening around the time period, but again, it's not specific to the information. And then date specific information, I add that in the notes to say, okay, this happened at a specific time. And I also have a calendar where I keep track of that. So if you're interested, I will make another video on the calendar and how I use that, but this is how I generally organize and categorize my research. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.